Welcome to my YouTube page. Today I'm going to talk about building this turtle shell. So this is the shell I found, and this is the one I made. So I'm going to be using Carbide Create Pro, and this is an example of how to build a turtle shell that's pretty large. It's about 15 by 19. So the skills used is going to be butcher block construction for the base material, project planning for 3D modeling, using widgets, multi-layer surface sanding, staining, and clear coat finishing. This is my turtle shell, and I thought I'd show you how I got the material to make it. So I just glued up old 2x4s that I cut up. And see, here's where I didn't get a little of the glue off, didn't run through the planer and get it off. But you start out with 2x4s. Make sure you don't have any nails if you're using used, but they're not that expensive. I try and get 2 boards out of each cut, and you just stack them up till you get to the width you want. I can't go over 15 inches because that's the biggest planer I've got. If you've got a smaller planer, you'll have to deal with that. But I use just regular wood glue, and I put it in a cup, and I just use my finger. I pour it on both edges, and as you can see, I don't even clean up necessarily the cuts from the table saw, and put them on both ends, glue it up. And you can use scraps. You can even choose to keep the knots if you like them. If you've got a board that's too short, you can even join it together if it doesn't bother you. And you line them all up, clamp it up, let it dry, whack the ends off, and then run it through a planer. Now the other thing I tried to do is I try and put the grains where they kind of, on each one, they kind of fight each other. And that way you get a more stable board. If you kind of turn them all the same way, where the grains are all kind of cupped the same way, the board will tend to warp. But when they're mixed like this, some are trying to pull up, some are trying to pull down, and frankly, you can just do it by random and almost end up with it. And then when you let it dry, and you can see my planer, all my other junk. So I've got a 15-inch planer. It's kind of a beast. It's 5 horsepower, so it doesn't have any trouble cutting stuff. And I can use my rated alarm saw to cross cut stuff. So that's how I came up with the wooden piece to make my turtle shell, and I'll use that for something else. So now I'm going to go into how I built this tortoise shell, or turtle shell. So there's a couple of reference videos we got over here. The first one is this Carbide Create Training Butterfly Part 1. It goes through all the skills that you need to build all the pieces of this, different types. And then this widget ramping tool goes to show you how I made a widget to stand all these ridges up and make them taller. So now we'll get to the video. Again, if you run around and look, this is the model here. We'll go ahead and try and show it. You can see what it looks like. A couple spots are too high there, but it's not going to bother me too much. So these are the pieces. There's an outline. There's these side pieces, and then there's an inner line. There's all these little specks that go on top of the outer line. And then each one of these has a little shell on the inside. And then there's spider web pieces here, and then the spine bumps here. So again, if you go back at the butterfly video, first thing I did was I took the shell, the picture of the shell, and I auto outlined it in the design tool over here. Image trace. I used image trace here to do this, and I did it at a couple of different threshold levels so I could pull out different pieces. So that's one way, and the next way is you just run around and you manually trace it and clean it up, and that's in the video too. You can see this isn't got a whole piece over here, so you can pull this piece out and then copy it and flip it to the other side. You can get both these pieces here. And then this is an inner piece, which I I made from just joining these together. These I pulled some off of here. I drew some, then I laid it on top of the side pieces and stretched them out so they fit across, and just tweaked them around until I got them to where I liked them. I didn't have to make them all individually. I copied and pasted them. These I pretty much had to run around and trace these little turtles because each one of those is going to have a little hump to it. And same thing with this here piece. It's going to have a hump to it. And these spider web pieces, I didn't make them individually. I pulled a few of them off of here, made a piece here, and then I copied it over here and mirror imaged it over here, shrunk it down a little bit, and then I just grabbed two of them. And if you move them around a little bit and copy a few extra ones, make some extra ones, they don't look like they're yeah, they kind of look like they're a mirror image, but that's not a bad thing. Turtles kind of look like that. So the last part we're going to model is the ridges on the back of the turtle tortoise shell. So these are the ridges that are on the back. And I copied some, and then I mirror imaged them over, and then I grabbed the nodes and kind of scoot them around to make them look individual. And here's where they are laid out on the back of the turtle shell. So I have a little bit of an issue here when it comes down to how you make these ramps. You see there's some missing right here that we're going to make. In order to make this ramp, if you use the traditional Carbide Create Pro tools, min, max, and equal, you will kind of distort the curvature of the shell in the two different areas. And so that's not the way I want to do it. So I have come back to using these widget ramps. And when you look at these widget ramps, when you pull them in, if you highlight the backbone piece, that's a ridge that you want, and you pull in a widget, only this part of the backbone widget will come in. The rest will not come in. So now that we've decided how we're going to build the ridges, the first thing I'm going to do is come in here and highlight the ridge that I want. So this is where we're going to bring a ridge into. This is what it looks like currently. So here's where our new ridge will be placed. So I come down here and I come up to import image right up here. And so when I do that, this screen pops up and I have this widget right here available to bring in. This is the one that we made with our widget ramp 2x4 video. Now, if it's not orientated correctly when you bring it in, you can open this PNG file and you can rotate it 90, 180 degrees and get it how you want it. So you highlight that and you bring it in, and it comes in just as we thought. So this is what it looks like when it comes in, and these are the parameters that you can adjust. So I made the height 3 millimeters and the scale is 10 millimeters. Now sometimes you have to invert it to flip it how you want it, and this reads like a book here. It's the ridge. It's the second one on the right. Angle 0, height 3, scale 10. It's an add, and there's no base height. So that's what it looks like when you bring it in. So that's how you make the ridges. So now we're going to talk about in general how I made all of the parts, modeled all of the parts. But so they start out with, this is the base, and this reads just like a book, like we did earlier. So this is how your model tool will pop up, and you've got the shape, the angle, height limits. You've got the height of the view of it. You got the name, and you add, and base height. And so it reads right across like that. So the first thing we did is, this is going to be a base height. It's going to be flat, no angle, height of 5 millimeters. The merge type is add and no base height. This one's going to be the middle, actually it's going to be the middle hump right here. That's what we're going to do next. And it's a round, no angle, shear height. So we're going to limit the height, or scale height, excuse me, to how we don't want it to go too high. And the height is 20, it's an add, and there's no base height. So it's a scale height, that's what that is. So now we're going to do the outer bezel, and it's a round scale height, 8 millimeter, add, no base height. And then we've got this outer outer bumps, these little bumps right here, and we're going to bring those in, and it reads like a book, round, and we added an angle, 45 degrees, scale height, 5 millimeters, add, no base height. And then we've got these inner bumps here, rounded, angle 45, scale height, 10 millimeter, add, no base height. And then we've got the spider web things that we built, round, angle 45, scale height 5, add, no base height. Now the rest of these are going to be on the ridges on the backbone. And again, those read like a book. Now some of these I had to invert because the model was a little different. Now this is what the import page looks like. And so it reads a little different than this one, but that's all right. If I left out invert, that means I didn't need to invert it. But you can read down these each one and see how I made each ridge. So the C is the center line, the left are the left ridges, and the right are the right ridges. So that's how I did all the modeling for the turtle shell. So now we're going to go into how we finished it. So now we're going to go ahead and show how I did the tool paths. So this is the screen. With 3D modeling, it's a little easier. All you really have to do is come up with a roughing pass and a finishing pass. So again, you need to tell it what you want to come up with a roughing pass and a finishing pass on. So you highlight the outside boundary that you want to cut. Then you hit a roughing pass, and this is what comes up. Now I'm using a 1/4 inch ball mill, and step over is about half of the bit. Depth of cut, depending on the type of wood and the speed, you're going to have to adjust those depending on the type of wood you had and how fast you want to go. When you come back over here and do remaining stock, it's going to leave 1/2 millimeter. And so that's how I set up my roughing cut. Now obviously the more you do here in the depth and the faster you go, the shorter your time. So that's how I did the roughing pass. And then next is the finishing pass. Now I ran 2 finishing passes, but you could get away with 1, which is great because it's half the time. Again, it's the same 1/4 inch ball mill, so I don't have to change anything. And I did a step of 0.3 millimeters, which is going to be kind of slow. So you typically want to run that at 10–15%. But the difference is whether you leave little grooves on top of your cutting or not. So the smaller you go, the better. Actually, even if you go too fast, it doesn't cut as well. So you'll have to balance again with the type of wood you have, how fast you plunge. Now you're not cutting away a lot of material on this one because you only left 1/2 millimeter of material left. So the bit, especially a 1/4 inch ball nose bits, shouldn't stress too much. It should be able to cut it. Now if you get in there and you're cutting, you can always use the features to speed up your cut. If you feel like it's cutting well, then you can either speed it up or not. Now I chose also to come over here and cut mine at a 45-degree angle. You can go 90 or whatever, however you want to cut it. That's just going to be a choice. And so that's how I set up my roughing pass and my finishing pass. Now when you look at the simulation for the roughing pass, this is what it looks like. So it cuts out as much as it can. Much as it can get away, so you're getting rid of the bulk of the wood, so it's going to take a while. This one's 90 minutes, but you don't have the step over as much. I think it's only about half the bit, about 50% with this one. And then you come down to the next one, and this is your finishing pass. So it's going to basically be how you want to leave it. Like I said, I cut one at 90 degrees and I cut one at 45 degrees to try and get it as smooth as possible. But again, you're paying for it with time. So if you cut your first one and you feel like that you can clean it up by sanding, then that's good. If you really want it smooth, you're going to have to make that step over really small, and you're going to have to cut a lot. Now you can see in here where these little pieces actually hit the red limit height and it flattened it out. That's okay. I don't mind that. It just didn't cut it because it was the top of the wood, but it definitely leaves the shell a little asymmetrical, which is fine. The other thing you can do in here is you can have a contour pass that cuts around your turtle shell, and you leave some tabs, and that's all done for you. But I just chose to use the bandsaw to cut it out, and then I sanded it individually and cleaned it up. So we're going to move on to now is to cutting the turtle shell away from all the scrap and sanding and finishing it. So this is what it looks like when we use a 10% step over. So it did a really good job of finishing it nice and clean. I don't have an action shot of it, but it looks really well done. Back to my turtle shell. I used the bandsaw to cut it away from the larger pieces that were around the edge. I tested a piece of stain to see what I want it to look like. Probably going to end up using this golden oak. So I cut it loose and then I sanded it. And so these are the tools that I use to sand it. I got a little air die grinder. Somebody recommended these little brushes. They work actually very well. I was quite pleased, and I just got your traditional sander, and then I got another little belt sander that worked pretty good. So that cleaned it up pretty good, so I'm ready to stain. So this is what it looks like when I stain it. I used a rag. You can use a brush that will work just as fine. You just try and get as much on you can, make sure you don't miss any spots. And don't worry about how thick you put it on, just kind of glob it on. You want it to soak in a little bit, so the more the merrier. Just make sure you don't miss anything. And then you just keep rubbing it in. Try and get off anything that's stacked up. Rag. A few, but I seem to have my radial arm saw as the catch-all space for all my projects. It always seems to be a good spot there. I want to make sure it breathes, so I'm going to prop it up. So that's what it looks like after I've cleaned it up. Here's what our tortoise shell looks like done. Got 3 coats of polyurethane on it. You can see the ridges, they just all stand up. Nice and smooth. Lots of detail. It pops out. This was fun. So the final coat was a couple of coats of water-soluble polyurethane, and then a couple of coats of clear gloss to get it to nice and pop. So this finishes up this video on how to make a large tortoise shell. Here's the other resources that I mentioned earlier, the Carbide Create Pro training. Butterfly Part 1 and 2 gives you the skills that you are needed to make the individual pieces. The ramping video helps you make the widget. So I know this moves along, a lot of material, and it's meant to address several different levels of workers, woodworkers. So if you found this useful, please like and subscribe. Thank you for your time.